Hello and a very warm welcome to our special Christmas edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is a man who is always very busy, but particularly perhaps during the festive season, because he is one of the world's leading conductors of choral music. And here he is in person, Simon Halsey.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us today on
You're
Talking
welcome.
Germany. Now, Simon Halsey has picked up no fewer than 3 Grammy Awards, each for his work with the prestigious radio choir here in Berlin, where he's been the chief conductor for a decade now. He's also linked with a bewildering number of other choral ensembles around the world, and he's an irrepressible talker, so I'm sure we can very much look forward to hearing what he has to say about the following topics. The ultimate inclusive art form, that's how Simon Halsey describes choral singing, and he says that it's not just high culture, but fun. A time for sharing and reflection. Small, large, conventional patchwork. The focus at Christmas is on families. So, how are our guest and his musical family celebrating? And past and present. Most Germans love Christmas, but some, it seems, have a rather shaky understanding of what they're actually celebrating. Simon Halsey, thank you very much for joining us once again. I want to begin with a quote from you, that you have said that choral singing is one of the most important things in our culture. Can you explain that passionate conviction?
Absolutely. I think that particularly in these rather broken times, anything that binds people together is extraordinarily important. And for us here in Europe, singing goes right back to the very beginning of our culture. It's something that clearly the music itself is an international language that we can all join in with. There are so many examples. One can go to a new country, find a choir, and on a Thursday evening in your first week, already make new friends, have something in common. I also think that in this particular time we have a renaissance for choir music. There are new youth choirs left, right and centre, both in Germany and in the UK. There are programmes to get kids singing in schools again. And very importantly, as we begin to live longer, there are now programmes for what we call seniors to make music together. And I'm particularly involved in Newcastle in a project where we really are finding it difficult to find enough opportunities for the hundreds, thousands of older citizens who want to sing ideally every day.
Wonderful stuff. Now, you're involved specifically here in Berlin with the Berlin Radio Choir. I'd just like to ask you a little bit about the German choral tradition. Some would say that the emphasis is on, it's very rigorous, it's very earnest, very disciplined, and perhaps there's not enough emphasis on fun. Am I being unfair?
Possibly. I think things are changing. There is a great choral tradition here in Germany, one of the very finest in the world, and we only need to think of all the great composers from the Renaissance to the present day. Things are very lively, and particularly today there's a lot of new publishing, there are a lot of new arrangements, and I think perhaps the sort of lighter influences of the English-speaking world are being felt here, so that there's a real sort of international exchange going on. So quite often I find myself doing German music in Birmingham, and very often I find myself doing French, American, British music here in Germany. So things are loosening up.
Great stuff. First impressions there from Simon Halsey. Here's more.
Eine kleine Probe.
Simon Halsey is always on the go. Since 2001, the renowned conductor has been traveling between Birmingham, where he lives with his wife and children and directs the City Symphony Chorus, and Berlin, where he's chief conductor of the radio choir. With Halsey at the helm, the choir has won international acclaim and 3 Grammys, the latest in February 2011.
Und so weiter. Let's try it. It'll be terrible. Sorry, excuse me.
Now 53 years old, he also enjoys passing on his love for choral music to the next generation. He founded a master class for young conductors and choral students at the radio choir in Berlin. Halsey was born in London to a musical family. He studied at the Royal College of Music in London. He originally wanted to become an orchestra conductor, but in 1983, Simon Rattle brought Halsey to Birmingham. Rattle was conductor of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and he appointed Halsey choral conductor. To attract new audiences to choral music, Halsey is willing to try new ideas and perform in unusual venues, like this 2009 concert at Berghain, Berlin's world-famous techno club. His sing-along concerts in Berlin always draw a crowd.
Gehen wir.
Once a year since 2003, over 1,000 amateurs sing together with the professionals from the radio choir in the Berlin Philharmonic. Halsey believes everyone can sing. He's brought many of his project ideas with him from England to Berlin, like the Lieder Choir, where managers and professionals can experience the communal enjoyment of singing in a concert. Here in Germany, Simon Halsey has received the prestigious Federal Order of Merit for his services to choral music. He also sees his many awards and achievements as a tribute to the people he works with, especially his singers. And today, he's our guest on Talking Germany. A very warm welcome, Simon Halsey.
Halsey, some wonderful scenes there from your career here in Berlin and in Birmingham, what have you. Let's go back to your early days, your mum and dad. They were both professional musicians.
They were. My father was and is one of the great choral conductors of his generation. And we have at home the correspondence that he had with Vaughan Williams, with Britten, with Stravinsky. Indeed, I can remember going to a rehearsal where Stravinsky was present. I was about 6 years old. It was in a very cold church in London. And Stravinsky was sitting there in a coat with a hat pulled down over his head. My father was doing a performance of the Mass by Stravinsky, and Stravinsky was saying nothing. My father was getting rather nervous and turned to him at the end and rather nervously said, "So, Mr. Stravinsky, how was it?" And although I was too young to remember, apparently Stravinsky just said, "That was very nice, thank you." So that was my great touch with greatness. And my parents wanted me to sing. We have this incredible tradition in the UK that to a certain extent we have in Germany as well, with the Thomaner Chor in Leipzig and Regensburg and so on. But I was sent to be a cathedral chorister, and later as a student I sang in the very famous King's College Choir in Cambridge. So the whole Christmas thing, Christmas music, has been important to me all my life. And very early on I decided that this is what I wanted to do with my life, and well, I've been lucky enough to do it.
And then there was that very important moment, the legend of the two Simons.
Yeah. Well, this is an extraordinary thing. I was just about to leave the Royal College of Music and I saw an advertisement in the paper. And I've always been a little bit ambitious, I suppose. And this advert said, wanted a director of music at the University of Warwick. Now, the University of Warwick is one of the world's top 20 universities. And I thought, I'm 21. I'd like to do that job. So I wrote in and I said, "Dear Vice-Chancellor, I think I would be excellent for this job. I realise I'm a bit young." And they liked my application, and the next thing I knew I was shortlisted, and Simon Rattle, who was all of 23, had been invited to help them choose their director of music, and I got the job. And a year or two later, Simon invited me to join him also at the City of Birmingham Symphony. So there I was, incredibly lucky in my early 20s, directing the music in this great university and the choir director at the Symphony. And, well, you know, I've been at it ever since, and I've been at the City of Birmingham Symphony for nearly 30 years.
Well, let me ask you, Simon Rattle, I know he's a much-loved figure here in Berlin these days. In his early days, he came under a lot of pressure to prove that he could get a real German sound out of his orchestra. Have you come under pressure to get a similarly German sound out of your choir?
I've been under tremendous pressure. The two traditions are very different. The English choral tradition is based on extreme precision, but without ever worrying too much. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but not that much thought about the sound. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to say. Here in Germany, though, everything is about Chorklang, about the sound of the choir. And when I came to the Berlin Radio Choir, that is really famous for a very particular sound, and it's a choir where the choir members members themselves choose their colleagues. I mean, I have a certain amount of influence, but I don't choose my colleagues. They choose them. Yeah. And so I'm working with a sound and trying to preserve a sound that is nearly 100 years old. And to start off with, I really didn't know how to do this. And I'm sure Simon had the same sort of feelings. And we had to learn on the job how to cope with this amazing German tradition. And I hope I've got the hang of it now, but my goodness, I've been nervous over the last 10 years, I can tell you.
Good for you. Now, we're going to listen in now a little bit to Simon Halsey and the Berlin Radio Choir rehearsing a piece of Christmas music. And here we go. It's a wonderful piece of music. For me, it was a completely new discovery, and I'm very grateful to have made the discovery. We saw that it was Morten Lauritsen, an American composer of Danish origin, I believe, yeah?
That's right.
Yeah. Composed in 1994. I think that's very important, because for you and your work with the choir, the modern repertoire is of the essence.
It is, but there's a very important thing here. There was a period in history where modern music, however wonderful it was, modern classical music, pulled too far away from the public. And there was a problem where modern music, people thought, oh, I don't want to go to that. And the concert halls began to empty. And we have had in the 80s, 90s and in the 21st century, if you like, a bit of a rapprochement, that we have now composers who are not ashamed to write music like that, that is incredibly beautiful and based on tradition. And I find myself very happy with this sort of repertoire.
You talk about, you talked at the beginning of our conversation about a broken society, I think were the words that you used, and you're just referring to that a little bit about sort of problems in society, a wee little bit. I've got another quote from you here. You said a whole new generation is growing up that knows a lot about computers and popular culture, but nothing about classical music. I know tell me how important it is for you to reverse that trend.
It's totally important, but of course I'm not alone. Look at the amazing work that the Berliner Philharmoniker is doing. The radio choir is also doing an extraordinary job here in Berlin, and actually now practically all the ensembles in Germany are. It's something that we've had to take from the English-speaking world, and this is interesting. You see, the English-speaking world's culture is based on the word. It's a theatrical, film, television, novel, poetry culture, where only since the Second World War, what we call classical music has been added on to that culture. So British orchestras, for example, are relatively new. The idea of great opera houses, British operas by people like Benjamin Britten, this is all since the Second World War. So we had to go out and convince the world that classical music was something interesting, particularly in places like Los Angeles and Sydney, where honestly everyone would rather be eating burgers and going surfing. So why would you want to go to the opera house? But this expertise we've brought with us to Germany, where there is a great tradition for music, but where school music has, unfortunately, in a lot of places fallen off. And of course, there are so many interests in a modern culture. Why should you assume that classical music is important? So it's our job as musicians to get out there. And I just happen, I think, to have a knack for this. So I think it's my job, very particularly, to lead the radio choir at the forefront of this sort of renaissance for classical music.
Now, Christmas is all about families, but while the tradition of Christmas is very well established, the traditional family is, as we find out now, undergoing fundamental changes.
Although it has often been called a dying breed, nearly 2/3 of children in Germany still grow up in a traditional family, with a mother, father and siblings. Volker and Carina Holt-Frerich always wanted a large family.
It's my refuge where I find my greatest happiness, even when we're facing the difficulties and challenges that are always part of family life.
With 4 children and 2 working parents, life in a large family takes a lot of planning and organization.
We enjoy our time together as a family. We're lucky, even though it can be quite strenuous at times.
But not every family is a traditional one. There are about 1.6 million single parents in Germany, most of them women, like Randa and her daughter Fleur. Being the only adult in charge isn't always easy, and with only one income, money can be tight. At Christmas, for example.
We don't really need big, expensive gifts under our Christmas tree. What's important is the time we spend together and spending time with our friends at Christmas.
Modern families in Germany aren't always traditional. Thomas and Ingmar have been together for 18 years. Lucy and Julius are their adopted children. The 2 fathers are critical of German adoption laws, which allow only one partner in a same-sex couple to adopt a non-biological child. About 6,000 children live with same-sex couples today.
The traditional family, father, mother and child, is still the most common one. And it's lovely for everyone who has that. But there's no reason to stigmatize the single parents, the patchwork families, all the rest of us.
Today, a family is any place where children grow up happy and loved.
So, Simon Halsey, how traditional is your family? How traditional is your family Christmas?
Very traditional. So I used to sing as a child and as a student in King's College Choir. That meant that we did the Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols live to the entire world on Christmas Eve. And so actually as a child I used to spend all my Christmases actually in a boarding school or at university and only go home on the evening of Christmas Day. But since everybody in my family did this, it seemed normal to me. And actually it's really good fun being particularly at university with all your friends at Christmas. We had an absolute ball. In more recent times we get all our family together in my own home, but this year we're doing something new.
Tell me.
My children are now grown up and working, and so we've decided to break the tradition, and we're going this year to be in the Caribbean in a holiday resort, and we're not
very decadent.
Yes, we're not having a Christmas tree, we're not doing cards, and just for 1 year we're going to break the tradition and then work out next year what our new adult Christmas tradition will be.
Wonderful. Have you ever celebrated Christmas in Germany?
I have never celebrated Christmas in Germany, but I think the German traditions are fabulous. As you know, most of them are taken to the UK by Prince Albert and Queen Victoria 100 years ago. So there are not those many things that are so different, particularly since we've now adopted the German Christmas markets in the UK as well.
Is this true?
Yes, Birmingham is twinned, for example, with Frankfurt, and Frankfurt sends the most enormous Christmas market to Birmingham, and actually the differences are not so very great.
2 words that always come up in Germany at Christmas and always interest me, I think, because they tell our foreign viewers an awful lot about the atmosphere around Christmas here in Germany. One is Gemütlichkeit.
Yep.
Coziness.
Yes.
Yeah? What about Besinnlichkeit? Have you heard that one?
Yes, and actually from...
Do you wrestle with that term?
Yeah, you see, actually that is the fundamental difference between a German-speaking and an English-speaking Christmas, and it can be seen in the Christmas carols. The most famous German Christmas carol is, of course, Stille Nacht, Silent Night, and it's all about Ruhe, about having a quiet time at Christmas. And, of course, the English-speaking Christmas is all about let's have a lot of fun and make a great deal of noise.
And wear silly hats.
And wear silly hats. And from that point of view, Christmas is entirely different.
OK. Christmas here in Germany might be besinnlich and it might be gemütlich, as we've just learned. But what is it that people are actually celebrating? We have this little survey.
It wouldn't be Christmas without lights and decorations, but the nativity scene depicting Jesus in the manger is the origin of Christmas. Where exactly did this event take place?
In Jerusalem.
Bethlehem.
Right. And about how long ago was that?
No idea. 80 years?
100?
2,000 years?
Exactly.
But is the Christmas story true?
True or not, what's important is the Christmas story itself.
Mary and Joseph, and there was a census.
Mary was pregnant.
Birth of Jesus.
The baby Jesus was in the manger, right? That's when Jesus was born.
The three magi came.
From where?
From the east.
And then there were many presents. And of course, everyone knows the songs.
O Tannenbaum, o Tannenbaum.
Wie grün sind deine Blätter.
Well, maybe not quite everyone.
Nachts halb 1 Uhr, das traute hochheilige Paar. Freuet euch, ihr Christenheit.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey!
Merry Christmas!
What do you say about the quality of the voices there?
Well, leave something to the imagination.
Talking of singing, talking of voices, the German, in the English language we say Christmas carols. In German we say Weihnachtslieder. It's not just a translation, there's a fundamental difference between the two, I sense.
Yes.
You're an expert.
The British Christmas carol comes out of a secular tradition, and therefore we have things like, as we just saw, jingle bells, jingle all the way, which is a long way from Stille Nacht. Now, of course, there are lots of religious British Christmas carols, and we share a lot of melodies and we share a lot of traditions. But the more modern British Christmas carols are often quite fast and very jolly, and they're often in what's called 7/8 time, and they'll go la 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 la, or ya da 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 da, and there's a lot of dance involved in it. And I enjoy this difference, I must say. Of course, a lot of the hymns, a lot of the religious songs are more or less the same, particularly because there's always been this tradition of crossing cultures. For example, Germans believe that Handel and Mendelssohn are German composers. Well, you couldn't be further from the truth. We all know they're British. So that, for example, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, which we think of as a British song, is actually by Mendelssohn. And honestly, we have so much in common with each other. It's just the differences on the edges.
And when you talk about the German, you were talking about how jolly the English tradition is. The German tradition, it takes us back almost to the Besinnlichkeit that we were just talking about a little bit. Yeah? Do you have a favourite Christmas carol of your own?
I do. Every year when we do Hark the Herald Angels Sing in Birmingham, we have the full symphony orchestra, 4 choirs and a sold-out concert hall of 2,500 people. And that, with full symphony orchestra and the organ blazing and the descant and the sopranos, I burst into tears in the third verse, without fail, every year.
You've got 30 seconds to answer the following question. You have done so much, you have achieved so much. When you lie in bed at night, do you think there is one thing I would still like to do?
Yes, there is one thing I would still like to do, and I've only very recently begun to do it. I've recently begun to teach conducting, and I really would like now to pass on what I've learned in the last 30 years to the next generation. I'd like to be able to stop the next generation making a lot of the mistakes that I made. And I've recently also, to my enormous surprise, written a book. I didn't think I'd got it in me, and now I wrote it in German with a wonderful colleague.
You wrote the book in German?
Well, I wrote the book in English, and a wonderful colleague wrote it for me in German. And the two of us are now going to do a much expanded English version. And this is part of the same thing, passing it on to the next generation.
Lovely. Lots to look forward to.
Yeah.
Something else now we're going to move on to is our traditional Talking Germany quiz at the end of the programme. Quick questions, quick answers, please. What gives you the greatest personal pleasure? Conducting, singing or playing?
Conducting.
Your favourite choral composer of all time?
Bach, Purcell, Britten.
Can anybody sing, even me?
Everyone can sing, and I'll come back here and teach you in front of the cameras.
Wonderful. That's your lot for this Christmas edition of Talking Germany. What a lovely guest, Simon Halsey, man of music, man of many words too. If you've enjoyed his company as much as I have, do come back next week. Tschüss.